more minute for people to assemble, and we'll get started. Okay, well, let's get started. This is the Leaders in Housing Counseling call. We're glad you're all here. This is our final call for 2013. It's been quite a year, and we really appreciate everybody's presence, hard work, sign-on letters, filling out surveys, coming to meetings, speaking out on phone calls, contributing ideas. This has been a great year for all of us. I think the housing counseling world has moved forward in dramatic ways that will, in the future, change us in ways that will make us stronger and more effective. But, you know, no big secret here. There's a lot more work to do. So for today, we're going to talk about the Leaders in Housing Counseling National Meeting. Yay, we've got it set up for February 26th. More to come on the agenda on that. We're going to do some quick updates on issues we've all been working on. We've got the HUD Task Force, which has made a series of recommendations or ideas to engage with HUD about how to make HUD work more effectively with us. Fareen Alam will join us for that part of the call, and she's heading up the task force. I think you all have gotten to get to know her pretty well. She's a very effective thinker about all these things. We're going to do a year in review as best we can, given that it was a pretty crowded year. Matthew, I don't know, maybe we should do it as a song. What do you think?
We could try to come up with something.
Okay, maybe that's rushing it. That was just a joke. Anyway, so don't want to scare anybody here. And we'll talk a little bit about joining NHRC and remind people about the name change survey, which is doing just fine, thank you. And but if you want to weigh in, now's the time. So let's move on to the agenda. Okay, so last year, or actually a year ago, last year, on December 12th, 2012, NHRC had its first Housing Counseling National Meeting, and 96 of you attended. As anybody who was there knows, it was a very high-level discussion. Sarah Jarek was there for the entire meeting. We had people from CFPB, but I think the real guests of honor were the housing counseling agencies coming together, thinking through, discussing, and setting priorities on what we need to do and how to get it. And this launched many discussions, including how to change the name, how to integrate housing counseling more effectively, how to engage with the Obama administration. We did a lot of good work in that meeting, and we're going to do a deeper dive meeting February 26th. I think it's we're looking forward to having some good guests, so we're not going to announce them until we've got them confirmed. But we hope that you will be the guest of honor there. It will be in Los Angeles, and it's designed to coincide with other reasons for people to be traveling to LA so that it will be easy on your budget. So it's on the 26th, which is a Wednesday. The next day, Thursday, will be the NFMC National Grantee Meeting. And so many people are coming in for that. So please plan on getting there on Tuesday night for the so that you can be arrive on Tuesday the 25th, so you can be there for the meeting on the 26th, and then obviously if you're part of it, the NFMC meeting on the 27th. Plus some of you will be there for the NTI meeting, and that's fine too, and you're welcome to join us. The main meeting will go from 1 to 6. We will also have a meeting for NHRC members in the morning. which should be great for all of you that have joined. And if not, get your memberships in quickly because this will be good. But we'll plan for a pretty active and engaged time. We'll talk more about it as we get closer to the event. And we're certainly interested in ideas that people have that might help move the dial forward on the issues we're working on, and especially some West Coast guests that we can invite in. But it'll be good, as they all are. This one will be co-sponsored with National Council of La Raza and with Rural Community Assistance Corporation. Your organization is my favorite organization, but these two organizations are also very high on the list behind yours and are doing excellent work in the field. So it'll be a team effort. It will be very good, and we're looking forward to being with you and engaging and moving issues forward and hopefully framing what happens in 2014 in big ways. So join us if you can, and make your travel arrangements early so that we're built in. Okay, so what's happening out there in the world? Quick updates. So I'm going to take the speaker's prerogative and jump ahead on one quick update, which is that we've been working a lot on federal housing finance reform for what will replace Fannie and Freddie. And we did have a meeting with the White House. It actually was snowed out in early December, and so we ended up doing it as a phone call on this last Tuesday, but it was with Seth Wheeler, Wayne Ting, and Karen Chang, all from the National Economic Council, and the NEC is the institution that handles housing issues in the White House. It's headed up by Gene Sperling, and Seth reports directly to Gene Sperling. And they're part of a small team that Sperling has, but these were the right people in the meeting. And we had a great participation. So National Urban League was there, National Capacity, who else? Home Free, NCLR, of course, New Jersey Community Capital, Beyond Housing, Catholic Charities, NID was there, and gosh, I shouldn't do these off by memory. I'm sure I've left out a couple people, so excuses there. But this was an excellent engagement. There was a lot of thinking about how best and most effectively to engage housing counseling in the new format of the new structure, whatever it is. It could be Corker Warner, it could be Crapo and Johnson, it could be a reworking of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And, frankly, between you and me, it's not impossible that given the way that things work in Capitol Hill, it's possible that we may still end up with a reformulated Fannie and Freddie rather than something new. But our goal in these meetings has been let's build housing counseling in on day one in the whole process of originating loans, in making the funding decision, in securitization, in underwriting and securitization, and then in servicing. And so we had, as you all know, and many of you signed on to our letter that went to the Senate Banking Committee. We have some specific proposals. The White House was very receptive. It clearly they've been thinking about some of the ideas already, but some of them were new to them. It was a very enthusiastic meeting. They actually invited us to come back in January for face-to-face, and we'll try to work on scheduling something there. But the point is that this is all part of the process of trying to move the dial forward in the housing counseling world. And we are optimistic about working with the administration about trying to position housing counseling so that it's a lot more integral to the process, and people think of going to counseling when they think about making major financial decisions. Because of who we are, we also brought up the issue of making sure that there's proper access to mortgage funding, and especially for underserved communities of color, low and moderate income communities, rural communities, and that also took up a major portion of the discussion. There is a pretty fierce blowback against the idea of having goals as Fannie and Freddie had, even though I think that the goals were inadequate in the current political environment. It's been we may not end up with goals per se, but trying to think of effective surrogates that would be able to provide the same thing or maybe even a little better. The part of it is really integrating that theme of access to credit as part of the mission of the organization, so it's not just there to securitize loans, but also to make sure that they're properly available for people broadly. So just want to give you a quick heads up. There will be plenty more in 2014 on this, but it's very, very encouraging in the early stages. So Matthew, talking about encouraging, so what's our story on the federal funding update? Lots of things have happened since we last talked.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. So folks have probably heard, I guess it was last week, that the big news out of Washington was that there was finally a budget agreement reached for the first time in a few years at least. So this was an agreement that was reached between, so following the shutdown, the House and the Senate came together, formed a conference committee with and were assigned the goal of reaching an agreement by early December. And somewhat surprisingly, they were able to do that. I think that the shutdown had everyone rattled enough that they were willing to kind of compromise. So just kind of quickly, there was good news, certainly for the Democrats and for housing counseling. There was also some good news for Republicans, but the kind of big takeaway from it is that it eases sequestration by about more than $60 billion over the next 2 fiscal years. So they reached the agreement for FY 2014 and also for FY 2015, and gets rid of about $63 billion that would have been cut from because of sequestration. That was the kind of big win for the Democrats. They've been trying to roll back sequestration. That was their kind of big sticking point. For the Republicans, it did also actually, there's about $20+ billion of deficit reduction over the next 2 years. They did that by raising fees, by making some tweaks to benefits for federal employees. So there's kind of both sides had some wins in there. The important thing for housing counseling, though, is that there's the overall spend number is higher than what it was going to be. So it's basically just a bigger pot of money than we would have been dealing with had sequestration been in place. And that's true for FY 2014 as well as for FY 2015. So now that the House and Senate both passed this overall spending number, which is just over $1 trillion, and so now it's kind of starting the process over again, but with they're on the same page, whereas when we were talking about this in the fall, the House and the Senate were tens of billions of dollars apart. So the bottom line for housing counseling, we expect that they still have yet to set the actual appropriation for the THUD subcommittee, which will then set the appropriation for the HUD housing counseling program and for NFMC. But the kind of word on the hill is that it's going to be roughly about the same what it was for FY 2013 without the sequestration cuts. So those numbers were $45 million for the HUD housing counseling program and about $80 million for the NFMC. Maybe the 77, it's a little unclear how the sequestration kind of played with that, but it's going to be about $45 million for HUD and about $80 million for NFMC is the expectation. So it's it's certainly not a victory. It's not exactly what we were asking for, but it's much better than the slash levels that the House was trying to implement, and I think we should all count it as good news.
And on top of that, because they're covering 2 fiscal years, it's likely that the year starting next year is much more likely to start on time and not have the continuing resolution issues. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So
right.
It looks like what we've been doing, the budget process we've been doing for at least the last couple of years. Next year for FY 2015 will be should be an actual normal pass a budget, get started on time, not have to deal with all the CRs exactly.
Okay, wild cheering on that one. So Mortgage Debt Relief Act. What's happening?
Yeah. So this, and just a quick update, this is, we did the sign-on letter a few weeks ago, but it's basically has been in place now since 2007, but basically if you have a principal reduction, keeps you from being charged income tax on the value of a principal reduction is the short explanation of what it is. It's been regularly extended by Congress. It expires at the end of this year. The problem, there's bipartisan support for this, for extending it. The problem has been more of a procedural one where it's just whether it's going to be included in a package of tax extenders or get passed as a standalone bill. So it's been more of a process thing rather than a matter of whether it has support. We actually just got word that the Senate had tried to pass it as part of a package. Mitch McConnell, the minority leader, kind of blocked that. So it looks like it's not going to happen this year. We do think that it's going to happen next year. It's not a done deal, so we may be still reaching out to folks and trying to put a little more pressure on people early next year to make sure that it happens and happens quickly. The good news is that even if it does happen, say, a couple weeks or into January, they would make it, almost certainly would make it retroactive to January 1st. So it wouldn't have real consequences for people because they won't be filing taxes until down the road. But we want to make sure that it gets passed early and is made retroactive to January 1st.
And we'll probably have some early in January mobilization around trying to get key people in the House and Senate to be supportive. So when that happens, Matthew will be in touch with you. So we got the letter into OMB and President Obama about the FY 2015. How'd that go?
It was great. So we ended up, I actually don't have the final count, but we were right around, I think, about 180 groups signed on, a bunch of national groups, local groups, regional groups. It was a really strong showing. We asked for, basically we kept the ask at the level that President Obama had included in his budget last year. So that was $55 million for the HUD Housing Counseling Program and $77 million for the NFMC funding.
Good, and I guess we haven't heard anything back from anybody. You don't normally, but we didn't hear anything on this one either. And HUD certification. So we had a really nice statement there. How did that go?
Yeah, we had. Hopefully, everyone saw what we submitted by now. We circulated, and it was in the midst of. We put a lot in, and thanks to everyone on the call who was able to sign on to any or all of these things. But we did have kind of a flurry of sign-ons in December. With the certification comments, we were right around 100 groups that signed on, which I think was a great showing. I sent out an email earlier in the week that showed where you can go to see all of the comments, but I think the fact that we had so many groups sign on to our comments really is going to, kind of bring them to the top of the pile when HUD is going through those. And, for folks that aren't that familiar with the comment period, they go through and read everything carefully, and I mean it affects the decisions they make when they're crafting the final rule. And the fact that we had so many groups sign on to our letter, I think, is really going to give it a lot of weight when they're drafting the final rule. So thanks to everyone for helping out with that.
Yeah, and I think it was a nice, specific, practical set of comments too. So that was very good. A lot of input from the field. So on Treasury post-modification counseling, so struggling here. I know some of you have reached out to your servicers, and the initial response is often that they're going to contract with one of the large call centers, and we are vigorously arguing that should not be mutually exclusive, that they can certainly contract to work with a large call center because of capacity issues, but that there should, at least as a minimum, that the agencies should be able to provide post-modification counseling if they provided the initial modification counseling, delinquency counseling, and they have the initial relationship with the client. We're pushing up against this. Treasury, I think, has come around to our way of thinking and is encouraging this idea. There turns out to be lots of logistical issues that the servicers have in the way that the directive, the 13-08 directive, was written. But we've found that Treasury is willing to be flexible where there's a really good active plan. So we're going to push this in the early new year. It only starts March 1. We know that the servicers are in flux on this right now, so nothing's been nailed down to the extent that there's not openness to being able to fix this if we can get the right mix. So we're going to continue pushing this in January. I think it's a really important piece of funding for counseling agencies for the work that we do that really is beyond the, to help people beyond the most immediate getting a modification. So we'll keep you in touch on that. Understand that it's a little frustrating right now. We will keep pushing. This is one of our top priorities. One last thing, if you were on the FHA announcement that FHA did on the phone call last week on how the fund was doing and the actuarial charts, a very interesting part of the conversation. The FHA has said that they are at the point now where they don't think that they can raise their mortgage insurance fees any higher, that it will drive too much business away. And the question is, how can they improve the performance of the fund? And they said housing counseling would be that vehicle. I mean, they said other things, but that was the first on the list and the one that was the most concrete. And it's a tribute to our work. So good work out there. I think we want to figure out how to capitalize on this and not make it an abstract idea, but a useful idea to help grow the industry. Absolutely part of this is how to figure out how to fund the work that people do on FHA loans, and that will be part of what we work on in 2014. But you know, tip of the hat to you for having us get positioned this way, and wanted to make sure that you all knew about it. Good. Okay, so let's pivot to the HUD task force. Afreen, are you with us?
I am.
Oh, good. So we have, so the task force has been hard at work, so thank you, Afreen, for leading this effort, and had another marathon call last week. I think we have a list of ideas on what we want to engage with HUD about, and I think what would be most valuable would be for us to talk a little bit about some of the specific ideas and what we're proposing to HUD, and encourage people to call in and give us some feedback if this is if we're on target or if we're missing things, and actually I would put one plug in for all of us to be as specific and concrete as possible, so that we can, when we engage with HUD, we have the ability to say not that it's just a problem, but this is the specific place where it's hitting us, and if we've got a good concrete suggestion to fix it, that'd be good. So, Afreen, do you want to kick off with any thoughts, or should we just walk through the list?
One of the things I was thinking about, good afternoon everyone, first of all, one of the thoughts I had was we will go through the list, the laundry list that the task force came up with, but also if there was any merit to have, once we discuss this laundry list, for the agencies to go back to either their affiliates, branches, and or their counseling team, if they're not on this leaders group already, to discuss these items, and if anything else that comes up in addition to these items, or to add depth to these items from your counselors, from your intake staff, and from folks who are impacted by the HUD processes day in and day out. So that's just one idea I wanted to throw out there. You know, once we get through the list today, it might be helpful to get more in-depth discussion going within our each team, and then come back and regroup next year before we meet with HUD.
Good.
And the other thing I also wanted to pitch was, you know, we are always looking for members in the HUD task force. If you're not already part of our task force and are interested, just please reach out to Matthew and Bruce, and you will get added on. Like we always say, more the merrier. All right, for that, I just wanted to go over the 4 main areas that the task force came up with to focus on. And it is the document that I'm looking at was circulated by Matthew right before the call. So the 4 areas are reporting, the HCS system, the biennial performance review, and the NOFA. In fact, I'm going to start with the NOFA, which is at the bottom of the document, since, you know, as Matthew has suggested, with the budget passing, we should be expecting NOFAs in the next couple of months or so. And essentially, the task force thinks the NOFA process was a huge improvement, the latest one, over the past years. And we would like to see that kind of efficiency continue and streamlining continue. However, there are some areas where agencies felt that they don't have a lot of clarity on, and those are the things that are in item number 4. So things like administrative costs when it comes to the intermediaries, the scoring, the internal scoring and ranking process that HUD engages in some of the categories, so including budget, the different services and mode, and the networks and the other HUD programs that the agencies participate in besides the comprehensive grant. That was one of the sections in the 9906 Excel sheet that we had to submit during NOFA. So those of you who had debriefed with HUD after you got your award were probably disclosed how you fared, but one of the areas that HUD did not disclose and would help us to improve our program would be what processes they engage in internally to rank the results. Similarly, the cost per client assessment is still being very crude assessment where they basically divide the total number of clients by the amount of award that were given. And the task force felt that it should be more sophisticated than that and possibly more individualized so that it really weighs in the actual costs for each of the network. There is a real pressing need for a HUD handbook for intermediaries, so it's clear what the intermediaries are responsible for. And there are many areas where there is just no direction when it comes to intermediaries' responsibilities. For example, when we discussed the biannual performance review, we discussed that HUD has come up with a new methodology, but it's still not clear how the agencies are being prioritized for a biannual performance review by HUD and what the intermediary's role is within that. There are, depending on which part of the country you are, the intermediaries receive, as well as the local agencies receive different priorities during the VPR. And that the emphasis on different areas vary from the geographic location. So the file labeling system was one example. Same thing with the application checklist was an example. Every agency got a different direction depending on who their GTR was. Documentation was the same way. And we felt that the system for tracking the amount of time spent on a case has to improve so that it's not the burden is not entirely on the counselor to track their time and track it and be specific to a grant. The billing situation in general is a big grievance for everybody, and that brings me to the reporting issue, and particularly PAR, the personal activity report. It is not clear why what exactly that HUD needs from the agencies that resulted in requiring this personal activity report in the details that they wanted. So what we would like to request HUD is to explain what is involved properly, but also if there is a way to come up with a billing billing option in the Counselor Max or HCO so that the counselors can easily track their hours. And since the counseling activities and appointments are already in Counselor Max, it might be easier to build a component in Counselor Max to track these hours. In addition to PAR, the other reporting issues had to do with the 9902, and the intermediaries feel that 1 month after the agency submit the report is not enough to have the final report due back to HUD. So the intermediaries are requesting more than a month at the end of the quarter to be able to submit the final report in each quarter, that is. Other requests include adding a financial management or education component as a category 9902 because increasingly we are seeing that need in our communities. So it's not always connected to the housing service as a primary service requested. It can eventually lead to a housing service, but financial management and education is a burgeoning demand, and it would be very helpful to have a category in 9902 for that that is not connected to the counseling. Numbers in HUD column is another ongoing issue. There are varying and sometimes contradictory instructions how HUD numbers are being calculated. Particularly for the intermediaries, the issues involve, whether the numbers in the HUD column should be against the projected numbers that are submitted during the contracting process, or if it should be part of the budget, the total housing counseling budget, and be an aggregate for intermediaries of their agencies. So in addition to that, how that is being juxtaposed against the personal activity report in terms of client served. So there's a lot of gray areas, unanswered areas about HUD numbers, and we would like to have one specific, guidance on how it's calculated, so we know how to project our numbers as well as connect that with HUD dollars. In addition to that, the housing counseling system it continues to have problems. So it's still not connected to Counselor Max. Report Max also has some issues with connectivity. And for intermediaries, the current system allows intermediaries to decide whether 9902 numbers are entered by the intermediary or by the subgrantees. However, there are varying instructions depending on the geographic area again from HUD, so it would be good to have clear instructions on whether or not intermediaries are allowed to enter the 9902s for their branches and affiliates. HUD goals, again, this is also appears to be arbitrary, whether it's a percentage of the budget or not. The delay in HUD awards makes it impossible to set goals against any kind of budget or in absence of a budget. And if this keeps happening where the award keeps getting delayed and delayed, there should be instruction on how the goals should be set and evaluated against. So those are basically the items we have come up with. Again, as Bruce said, we want to be as specific as possible in our issues, and we are hoping to get a meeting with HUD next year, preferably soon after the NOFA deadline, after it's completed. We would like to meet in DC with HUD officials, and I believe Sarah has been very open about that. And since the comment period is over now and the final rule should also be released on the HUD counselor certification, it would be a good time to for all the groups here to get together and get on the same page with HUD and combine the HUD counselor certification discussion as well as these HUD issues in the same meeting. So if you are interested, again, please join the task force and bring in your ideas and issues and also solutions. And again, please discuss these items with your individual teams and add depth to these items, and we would love to hear back from you about this. Thanks.
So Matthew, do we have any questions or comments from people? Any raised hands?
We actually do not. So folks, if you do have feedback right now, reactions, questions, comments, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, this is a first. So, Afreen, do you have a sense that we need a longer list, and are there other areas? Do we need to think about other areas to be included, or do you think that we're pretty much good to go at this point?
I do think we have in terms of the big areas of discussion, we do have a comprehensive list. Again, multiple brains is better than one brain. So if there are other items, I would love to hear about it. But other than that, what the task force needs to do now is add some depth and specificity to these issues and elaborate on these issues so that it's clear to HUD.
And the plan is to submit something specific on the NOFA now, because that's one is cooking right now, and then aim for a meeting with HUD after the end of the NOFA process, so that people have time to go and actually sit down with HUD. It sounds like we've got some people willing to fly in from different parts of the country for this meeting, so this will be a pretty serious face-to-face. And as Afreen said, we have talked with Sarah Jarek about this, and they're very interested in assembling the right team to work with on this. One of the ideas, I guess, that we're interested in is often we have a list of saying we want so-and-so to do X, Y, and Z. And in this case, one of the challenges that we face and HUD faces is that it's not just that it's a good idea, you have to fit it into the compliance and regulatory issues that HUD has, those famous OMB circulars, which need to be interpreted. They aren't quite as direct and clear as one would like. I find them incredibly difficult to read, and having read them, incredibly difficult to understand. So part of what we want to do is try to work with HUD about what the best solution is, rather than sort of saying this is what we'd like to see, because there are these interpretive issues that pop up. Well, good. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Afreen. We really appreciate all the productivity here. There's about 30 some odd people on the task force right now, but we have room for extras if we need it. Good. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Okay, so it's been an interesting year, and I think we thought we'd cram in a few things of what we can check off on the list of things we had done, and if Matthew had to go down to the smallest typeface possible, and we certainly didn't put everything on the list. But it's been a very interesting, exciting time, and I wish I could say we've won everything we wanted to win. We haven't. There's a lot to do. There's tremendous pressure still on the housing counseling industry in terms of funding and in terms of managing client flow, and I think in having technology and having the up-to-date technology and technologies which reduce the amount of work you have to do, and we're trying to work on some ideas on that as well. But on the plus side in the column, the OCC settlement, which delivered $24 million in new housing counseling money without strings attached in the beginning of the year. The MHA program, which is the run through NeighborWorks, which parallels NFMC, wasn't as good as we would like it to be. But it was new money, and I think they're now talking about it being about $20 million, $18 or $20 million, and room to expand. So in a talk with Treasury just yesterday, there was some openness to fine-tuning the program, and we'll try to address that. And frankly, between you and me, I think we'll try to argue that MHA program should be paying more per case than for the 450 figure, and define what the tasks are more broadly so that it gives you more tools to work with. Not saying that will happen, but that's definitely the position we'll take. And we're actually, you in the field, you can be very helpful about telling us what's not working with MHA and how to make it easier to make it more successful. One nice thing, we've been pushing outreach heavily, and the MHA program came with some outreach money. We will continue to push Treasury to free up substantially more TARP money and use that for a bigger, broader campaign similar to round 2 of the IFR funding, where it'll be multi-level, where it will drive, and part of our goal is that it really drives people to the counseling agencies and to legal services, so that it's not, so that you're going to see more of those clients if we can get that to happen. But part of it is HAMP is going to be extended for 2 years, which you all participated in. I mean, there really were only 2 major groups that were pushing for this on the housing side, and there was support among the realtors and some of the banks. But on our side, it was the Americans for Financial Reform and NHRC, and we held a lot of sway in this conversation. And the original proposal was a 1-year extension, and while we didn't get everything we wanted, we did get it up to 2 years, and that was a win. So, we're making progress on some of these things. The FHA back-to-work mortgage, and the reason it's significantly on this list is that it had the the housing counseling requirement, and we created a directory to help guide homeowners who are looking to get a mortgage and lenders who are looking for a counseling agency to provide the services. And that's actually seems to be a very simple, easy thing for us to do, and we'll try to do other things like that in the future when there are other opportunities. Treasury post-modification counseling, well, it's a work in progress, so it's not a win yet. Why it's on the list is that we have been pushing very hard to the White House and to the administration and on Capitol Hill about recognizing that the work of housing counseling in the delinquency field is not just about trying to get somebody to a modification, but also to get them back on their feet financially in all their finances. And Treasury's post-modification counseling was in response to that, and it's an important step forward. In order for it to be successful, we really need to make it available to groups all across the field, and that they get funding for the work they do in this area, and that's what we're going to push in the upcoming year. Hey, we have eliminated the use of Social Security numbers on, as a requirement on the third-party authorizations. We have sort of made this the standard. Last year we were able to, the year before, we were able to stop HUD from requiring the Social Security numbers when people were submitting data into the HUD system, into the HCS system, and here we're able to get them off the third-party authorizations. So please alert us if you find any more incidents that happen around that. So we're saying that the Leaders in Housing Counseling listserv has become a very big win in our world, and it's a place where a lot of high-quality dialogue happens, where we've been able to elevate a whole series of issues, including the Social Security number issue. We will work to grow this over the next year, but there's 700 people on the list right now, probably representing about 650 organizations. Now, I will say that there's about 2,000 housing counseling groups out there, so we're missing a few. So, recruit your friends in the field to get on. We really do think of this as a list for managers and supervisors and executive directors, partly because if we were trying to get all the housing counselors, it would be more than we could manage. And what we're really trying to do is reach out to organizations. So the idea is that if you're on this call, you can then tell your staff and bring them in on specific issues when they're needed. So on the national mortgage settlement, we were very active in trying to make it a more aggressive settlement. You know what, we didn't all the work we did on settlements. We didn't list that here. But so a major amount of our time is spent on trying to get settlements to work more effectively. And we're continuing to push right now on the Chase settlement, which has a heavy principal reduction component. We are trying to get it so that the principal reduction component is one that counselors can access for their clients and not just be told, you know, there's an accounting division someplace that's already made the decision, and you won't have any influence on it. So that's that'll continue to be a major push for us in 2014. There are other settlements, and the other settlements will push for extra funding and things like that. And then on the AG settlement, the national mortgage settlement, we created a checklist jointly with the with NCLC, the National Consumer Law Center, and both of us working together trained over 1,000 counselors on using the settlement standards. That checklist, by the way, is still actively being used, and you can click it up. And we hopefully by early next year there will be a component where you can upload cases, and you don't have to do as much entry into to get your clients in. We did a bunch of studies and surveys on, so the most significant one I think was the problems with servicing, which got considerable attention. It was aimed at the 5 servicers who were in the national mortgage settlement to show that there was still broad noncompliance. And we will continue working in the servicing area on these compliance issues. We did a lot of work with the Fed and with the OCC, and we will continue pushing that area. But we also did a study which many of you participated in, was widely circulated, widely discussed, and helped push the agenda forward. And we did that jointly with the California Reinvestment Coalition. We did a study on funding cuts, and did a whole variety of others on the availability of HUD programs, things like that would became useful in dealing directly with HUD. We did one on the 9902s, which we understand has gotten a lot of attention. We'll see where it all ends up, but was something that HUD used pretty broadly in their rethinking on the 9902. Sign-on letters, well, hats off to you. You've really done a great job in that field, and we really have garnered a lot of attention for the housing counseling community on this. And we did Senate visits a few weeks ago, and it was interesting that people are beginning to know the name of the National Housing Resource Center, but absolutely everybody is looking at housing counseling these days favorably. We really didn't spend much time on an issue which we normally spend a lot of time on the Hill on, which is, does housing counseling work? And that while there's still work to be done in that area, it really seems to have, people are really recognizing your work out there. So very good on that part. Long list of the many meetings we had with the White House, with the administration, with the regulators, with Congress. Quite a few of you participated in some of these meetings and on telephone calls. We will have our whole new round of calls on this. You know what we didn't mention on this list? Another big highlight was the reconfiguration of the mortgage application that FHFA is doing. So on the application form that Fannie and Freddie use, they're in the process of redesigning it. And just a month or so ago, we got a commitment that housing counseling data fields would be included in the new application. And that will hopefully make tracking counseling easier, referring clients who get into trouble back to your agency easier, and we hope will lead to some bigger issues like being able to track the performance and whether counseling works and what programs work the best, and where we can learn about what counseling pieces work most effectively, all of which will be helpful in the future. I hope that it will also bubble up to a point where it'll be used to figure out when somebody's when an investor's buying a package of loans, that they can see that 12% of those loans were counseled and give a slightly better price as a result for that package. We'll see, but this redesigning the application is a big part of that. What will happen is that you can use the HUD form that will be available soon to certify that you've done the counseling. The data fields will match what goes onto the form. The originator will fill out the form and include those data fields. It goes into something called the Uniform Mortgage Data Program, and that's a program that will follow the mortgage through its life, and your agency will be tied to that list. And it's a big breakthrough for us, and hopefully will be something that will make our work more effective in the future. And recognition, I think it's come up several times on this call today. There's a lot of recognition for housing counseling in the field from all the players. Have we gotten that to translate into much more money? Not yet, but we're certainly working on some things. The Coalition of Housing Counseling Intermediaries has become a forum for this idea of including a few basis points in the servicing strip. This is something that we all will promote as an idea that is very useful in the future and could create an ongoing source of money independent of allocations by the government. And hey, the Tri-Merge credit reports, $9.75, all soft pulls, includes credit scores. We would love for more people to use it. It's there to be used for any organization that's a member of the National Housing Resource Center and available to everybody who joins. So please consider joining. We're really out there. In a lot of ways we need you, and we think that you need us, that what we do, we can do because we're organized and able to pull together and create a consensus view of things and really address these issues with the decision makers, the policy makers, with the financial services industry. And the more of us that are pulling this together, the more of us that are part of that, the stronger we will be. So, oh yes, thank you, Matthew. So we've got our survey still up for changing the name on Housing Counselor to HUD Certified Housing Advisor. It's running about 75% in favor, 25% opposed, and the opposition actually is pretty nuanced. We're appreciating what people are putting into the box, and and many of the thoughts are not as opposed as one would think. So, I mean, this is helpful. There'll be other things we need to do to test this and build some consensus around it, but we will start shopping this around the rest of the industry in the upcoming year, and it'll be a topic of lots of discussion, I hope. And I bet it'll come up at the meeting in February 26th. That's the national meeting we're doing in Los Angeles. That's how we started out this meeting, and we'll bring it up more often. But these meetings are fascinating, exciting things. It's great for you to be with your peers in this work. People are thinking deeply about how to make this work more effective, more efficient, more sustainable, and we in some ways have to figure out big questions about our business, and these meetings become a forum for that. So thanks again for all the great work you're doing. We're going to wish you a Happy New Year and have a great holiday. You earned it. That's all I have to say. So this is the first call. We're going to stop before the full hour is done. Give you extra 5 minutes to do your good work. Thanks, everybody. Have a good year out there.